You are tuned in to the Beats That Never Stop, a cultural history of the arts, hosted by Ogi Kidd and guest. Welcome to the Beats That Never Stop. I'm your humble host, Dalamar Lee McTizzick, otherwise known as Ogi Kidd, but to keep it simple, you can just call me Kid. My goal with the show is to learn, to express, discuss, to reminisce, share, and discover what it is about this particular artistic medium that holds so much power over us, individually as well as together. Today, I think the individual is a great place to start, particularly with myself. After all, if I am to be your host, I should first answer the question, who is this kid, and why should I care? The first answer to this question is actually pretty simple. I'm a DJ, a producer, a vocalist, and an all-around practitioner and enthusiast of music. My journey began as a child being subjected to the noises provided by my relatives, friends, movies, television, video games, and of course, the radio. It's incredible to consider just how there's absolutely no part of our lives that exists without music. Even the birds and the insects seem to find pleasure. Cats and reptiles hiss to give warning to would-be trespassers. Even those that cannot hear can feel the vibrations of a loved one's heart. And what is sound, and by extension music, but physical vibrations carried to our ears and bodies through air and touch, which may not seem like music at first, but you've never heard what I can do with a microphone and a pocket full of change. Anyway, my point is that music comes in many shapes and forms. It's an inherently instinctual part of all living creatures, debatably even necessary to our survival and existence as a whole. Perhaps God, if you believe in such a being, or beings, are musicians. Prayers, the chants of monks the world over, music to the ones we revere and praise, respectively. That to say, I sang in the choir as a child. Not necessarily by decision of my own, but I did so nonetheless. I was surrounded by church as a boy. Rather, church is plural, and I don't mean the chicken joint. Between religious elders, 10 years of private schooling, and Sunday ventures to Bethel AME off of 24th Street, I've remained surrounded by the gospel and by extension all of its various forms of music for pretty much, I'd say, at least half my life. From the African Methodists, the Baptists, the Catholics, and many, many more, I've heard it all. But I don't mean to paint a false image. Gospel was far from the only music I was exposed to during my most formative years. In fact, I recall hearing far more R&B, soul, jazz, electronica, hip-hop, and my favorite above all as a boy, rock.
The metal will live on. Punk rock tried to kill the metal, but they failed as they were smite to the ground. New wave tried to kill the metal, but they failed as they were stricken down to the ground.
That was Tenacious D with The Metal. I would challenge anyone listening to this broadcast to find music of any and every genre with which they can identify. Using gospel as a further example, historically, rock, my childhood love, was viewed as being at odds, for a multitude of reasons that we can explore in future installations of the series. However, the truth at its core is that there is no such thing as an evil genre. People, perhaps, as subjective as that can be, but not a broadly expansive musical style, especially when you consider that every genre has a gospel branch to it. For every Dungeons and Dragons inspired band like Slayer, there's a band like Creed. For every grimly themed band like Korn, there is a socially driven P.O.D. that's payable on death. Good band, check them out.
I can still see the light at the end of the tunnel shine through the dark times even when I lose my mind. But it feels like no one in the world is listening, and I can't ever seem to make the right decisions. I walk around in the same haze, I'm still caught in my same ways. I'm losing time in these strange days, but somehow I always know the right things to say. I don't know what time it is, or who's the one to blame for this. Do I
That was P.O.D. with Goodbye For Now, featuring a very, very unknown Katy Perry at the time. As we proceed, you can follow this trend in line of thinking across all genres, all themes, all topics, philosophies. Doesn't matter. Everything exists in every genre. Between 2006 and 2009, 4 very important albums to my life would be released, changing my perspective on one genre in particular, hip-hop. As I mentioned before, I wasn't necessarily a stranger to the genre, but what I was most familiar with wasn't scratching the proverbial itch I had for music. Unlike other genres, hip-hop was lacking an ambassador in my life who could walk me through all of its nuances and history, leaving me to largely have to walk that path alone. In 2006, an artist by the name of Lupe Fiasco would release his debut studio album, Food and Liquor, a project that dives headfirst into the plights of the youth, as well as, but more distinctly, the black experience living in the harsh landscape of the west side of Chicago. Now, much of what I described is nothing particularly new for the genre, but the key difference here though is that he was speaking in a language which I am most fluent in.
What up, y'all? Yeah, soundtrack, what's poppin', baby? Woo! Y'all ain't know, I go by the name of Lupe Fiasco, representing that first and 15. Yeah, and this one right here, I dedicate this one right here to all my homies out there grinding, you know what I'm saying? Legally and illegally. You know what I'm talking about? So, check it out. First got it when he was 6, didn't know any tricks. Matter of fact, first time he got on it, he slipped, landed on his hip and busted his lip. For a week he had to talk with a list like this. Now we can end the story right here, but shorty didn't quit, it was something in the air. Yeah, he said it was something so appealing, he couldn't fight the feeling, something about it. He knew he couldn't doubt it, couldn't understand it, branded since the first kick flip he landed. Labeled a misfit, a bandit, cocoon, cocoon, cocoon. His neighbors couldn't stand it, so he was banished to the park. Started in the morning, one stopped after dark. Yeah, when they said it's getting late in here, so I'm sorry, young man, there's no skating here. And so we kick, push, kick, push, kick, push, kick, push, coast.
That was Lupe Fiasco's Kick Push. Moving on, in 2008 and 2009, artists Q-Tip and Yasin Bey, formerly known as Mos Def, released projects titled The Renaissance and The Ecstatic, respectively, works that I would consider, in the words of Q-Tip himself, to be abstract. As far as my vocal performances go, it wouldn't be until a dear friend of mine put me on to a rapper-producer duo, Idea, spelled E-Y-E-D-E-A, and Abilities, then similarly discovering on my own producer Nujabes when I would finally decide to take hip-hop production more seriously alongside my electronica production. This same friend would also encourage me to start rapping myself, which I've done ever since. Needless to say, my rough exterior and rigidness towards the genre had been fully shattered, and I had once again fallen in love.
All eyes on me and had nothing to prove, but yo, I thought I knew what a diamond shine like, but I felt a sharper love in the limelight from the Queen of Hearts, watching me quietly from the upper deck balcony. Sometimes I do suspect I'm an actor in a well-scripted, large divine comedy. When I look back, that frozen slice of time, it tried to defrost the senses lost. Now enough with the metaphors, the motivation that I wrote this letter for you to know that the music helps carry on. Like you see, a new day will bring us tomorrow.
That was Nujabes and Shingo 2 with the first part of their Lovesick series. I highly recommend checking out the rest. May Nujabes rest in peace. Now, this is where I break away from the topic of music briefly to share another confession. Music was actually never my primary passion or career goal in life. I was still practicing the arts, but my expression was primarily visual. Ever since roughly kindergarten, I had planned on becoming a comic book artist and a writer at some point, which I still very much plan on doing. The class which I was encouraged to start making music in by my classmate was in fact a graphic design class. To be fully transparent, I had actually graduated from that class. I just loved it so much that I sat in there during my study hall and lunch breaks. Shoutouts to Mr. Wynn, great teacher and dear friend. Throughout high school, I won awards from the Scholastic Art Competition via the Career Center, otherwise known as the Tech Building. Once I began my higher education, it was as a visual arts and graphic design student, but rest assured, music was never far away from my regular activities. Heeding the advice of my Career Center teacher, Mrs. Overman, I ended up going to Metro Community College. I'm glad that I did, not only because I ended up meeting people whom I cherish to this day, I also met the man who would become a dear friend and one of my mentors that I hold in the highest regard, Paul B. Allen IV. A name that many elders may recognize, Paul being the great-grandson of Omaha's own Paul B. Allen I, the owner and operator of the Allen Showcase on 24th Street. Needless to say, Paul and I got along discussing our shared enthusiasm over music, sparking a bond that stands to this day. He's also the reason why, in spite of going to school for and snagging my associate's degree in graphic design and sequential art, that I've primarily worked in audio engineering and music. You see, Paul was attending Metro for their film program and needed a sound guy for his projects. So when he asked me, I agreed, happy to help. From there, I've gained experience working on film projects. I've worked as a stagehand setting up and tearing down equipment. Paul got me my first official DJing gig alongside the incomparable Michelle Trosclair, aka DJ Foxy Troxy. I got to meet and shake hands with different people from all walks of life, especially within the art scene here in town, which I largely had no idea existed, being a relatively shut-in kid. I didn't really get out much, but when I did, it was like a whole world opened up to me, and it's all because of Paul, so to that man I say thank you.
Keep playing that song.
A song that probably doesn't need any introductions or explanations, but that was Hey Mr. DJ by Zhané. Now, getting back to what I was saying, I put off mentioning it until now, but for those of you who might recognize my voice, it's because you know me not as Ogi Kidd, but rather as Black Excellence from Mind and Soul 101.3 FM. You see, Paul was a program director, and I was the first person he asked to help work at the station with him. From there, I ended up meeting legends like Michael Scott, Marcy Yates, Zoboy, Big Wade, Curly Martin, Terrace Martin, Kamasi Washington, Kate DeSoe. I've held jobs at the B-side as a sound engineer. I attended the grand opening of Make Believe Studios here in Omaha, Nebraska after it was built. I say all that not to brag necessarily, but rather to say, because of meeting Paul and working at the radio station, I've ended up being able to meet all kinds of amazing people and do all kinds of amazing things that I had never even fathomed doing. Now, thanks to those same connections, such as my man Buddy the God, co-host, and another dear friend of mine, I'm working here with Miss Gayla Chambers at EWC Communications, as well as behind the scenes with First Sky Omaha. Of course, I still DJ, produce music, perform live, and flex my vocals here and there as I work on various projects quietly in the background. If you're ever interested, I'll be sure to keep you posted on any of my future releases. Right now, I only have a couple beat tapes out and a few singles that I'm not entirely proud of, but more polished work is coming, I'll say that much. With that, I conclude a rather abridged introduction to myself. Now, I'd love to hear from you. What are your thoughts on me, on music? What are your personal experiences, personal histories? Be it as a practitioner or as a fan. Who's your favorite? Who's your top 5 favorites? Let's start a real rapport as we continue this journey. What type of topics would you like me to cover within music or just the arts in general? Would you like to know more about me? Let us know. This has been the first of many episodes of The Beats That Never Stop, and I'm your humble host, Ogi Kidd. Until next time, I'm out. This has been The Beats That Never Stop, a cultural history of the arts, hosted by Ogi Kidd and guests. If you'd like to make suggestions, email us at ewcfacts@gmail.com. That's ewcfacts@gmail.com. This has been an EWC Communication production.